Hi, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes and let some other folks join. So bear with us for about 2 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first live talk. I am Susan Cook, the new CEO of Zaloni, and with me is my partner in crime, Ben Sharma, the founder of Zaloni, all-around guru, thought leader in big data management, and so I'm thrilled to be here with Ben. One quick note, please use the question box at any time to submit your questions during the webcast. Ben and I are going to chat for a little while. We've got a few topics we want to highlight, and then at the end, we will take as many questions as we possibly can. So we're going to jump right in. Ben, this world of big data management, I actually feel empathy for our customers and other companies out there because it's confusing and it has changed so much in the last 2 years. So, in your opinion, what are some of those key inflection points that have occurred?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has changed since we started as a company.
Yeah.
So, as a lot of you may know, Zaloni started with Hadoop. So, let's take Hadoop first.
Yeah.
So, we see a lot of movement and migration from traditional Hadoop architectures to the new way of doing things in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so, if you just kind of go back and look at what were some of the basic tenets of Hadoop, so one was obviously the local storage along with a distributed file system in the compute layer. So that has changed because cloud brings in the scale out storage layer as well as kind of the distribution where you have compute that can be spun up or spun down in an elastic manner. The other thing is that a lot of the traditional architectures that were based on MapReduce have moved over to Spark and other
Mhm.
engines.
Mhm.
And then there is emergence of cloud data warehouses, so
Yeah.
Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, and others that are actually enabling a lot of the application modernization as part of digital transformation initiatives so that applications are no longer dependent on monolithic data warehouses like Teradata and then moving on to these new architectures.
But when I was first talking to you about coming to Zaloni, there was a lot of buzz in the marketplace that, Hadoop is dying or data lakes are going away.
Yeah.
I think that's overstated. I
Yeah.
don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I think that is overstated because Hadoop was like a disaggregated stack. There were all these different components. So some of these components are being swapped out, like Spark versus MapReduce. There is a lot of emergence of S3 and ADLS as
Mhm.
the storage layer versus HDFS. But you still need distributed
Absolutely.
computing, you still need at scale processing. So, how do you enable those for your use cases and the applications that you need to build.
Absolutely. So understanding all of this change that's going on right now, how should large companies, large enterprises be thinking about their data strategy and their architecture?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I talk to a lot of CIOs and CTOs who are trying to modernize what they have in the organization. A lot of these drivers are based on need for bringing in advanced analytics with ML and AI. So there was a recent article in Harvard Business Review, which is very timely. And what they talk about are there are four key components that are needed for these new AI-led architectures. So first is having a strong foundation from a data platform perspective so that you have data pipelines where you can ingest data, clean data, standardize data, and make data available for downstream use cases. Then there is the aspect of algorithm development. So all the business use case specific algorithms that you need to build. The third is there is need for experimentation. So you're not going to just have an out of the box algorithm if you're a retailer trying to optimize your supply chain. You have to be able to tweak it and make it appropriate for your organization. So there is need for experimentation. And then fourth is infrastructure. So you need to then be able to deploy it at scale, whether it's on-prem or cloud or hybrid in those architectures. So when you think about that, and then what's top of mind for these CTOs and CIOs is that they're looking for open standards-based architecture that is based on being portable, like Kubernetes is something that comes up very frequently, and being able to do it in a multi-cloud. Even though they are moving to one cloud architecture, they don't want to be just stuck to that architecture. They want to be open and extensible as they think about multi-cloud environments. So those are some of the key patterns we see for enterprise organizations as they think about their data modernization.
I was just reflecting on your answer and how many acronyms and buzzwords were in that one single paragraph. ML, machine learning. It's the amount that people have to learn now to understand this environment. The complexity is amazing. So
That's right.
I feel that as people are modernizing their data ops and their data architecture strategies, it's getting more and more complex. So as they're contemplating these more modern architectures, how do they balance? Is it getting too complex?
Well, I mean, the thing is that you have to focus on agility and responsiveness for implementing your business use cases. Ultimately, it's about the business outcomes. But you have to also keep in mind that you are not going towards a traditional proprietary model. You're embracing an open and extensible architecture. And for that, you have to think about like, how do you create modularized, containerized environments as you drive things forward? And then that goes towards data as well. How do you actually create an agnostic layer with an abstraction so that today you may be deploying in XYZ platform and tomorrow you may be deploying in something else because your customer or your business needs that. So how do you create that as part of your foundational requirement so that you can then drive agility and business outcomes on top of it?
So if you're a CTO, CIO, chief data officer, the only thing you can count on is change.
That's
the
right.
one constant you
Yeah.
have is change.
That's right.
Speaking of probably one of the most significant changes that we've had in the last decade of technology is our movement to the cloud. So do you envision that most of these workloads will be in the cloud?
Yeah, so I mean, we see it all the time. So just to kind of give you some numbers, 2 years back, Zaloni as a company, 80% of our customers were on-prem, 20% in the cloud. End of last year, that number has flipped, right? So 80% of our customers are in cloud, 20% on-prem, and those that are on-prem have only specific use cases that are on-prem, and they're actually looking to move to the cloud. And when I'm talking about cloud, it's mostly public cloud infrastructures. So in doing so, now you need to think about what does that mean? Because one of the CTOs once told me that just like they wouldn't have just one database in an organization, they are not going to have just one cloud service provider. So multi-cloud is real, and it is going to be one of the key requirements. So how do you think about an architecture that can be deployed in multiple environments without having to rewrite application each time when you do so.
Mhm.
So being able to onboard some of the object stores that cloud service providers bring in, like S3 and ADLS
Mhm.
and others, being able to leverage compute engines, whether it's Spark based or traditional architectures like EMR or
Mhm.
HDN sites
Mhm.
that you can spin up, but being able to do so in an elastic manner and being able to leverage some of the economies of scale that these cloud service providers bring to the table are some of the key requirements as you think about moving to the cloud.
Even us as a enterprise software company, we made our first bet on AWS, but then we had to bet on Azure, and very
Sure.
quickly we had to bet on Google. So
Yeah,
it's not that you can put all your eggs in one basket in anything.
that's right. And then the other point that is even more important is that how do you then do data governance across these different cloud service providers?
Mhm.
Because you have to think about it in a generic way, in a way that actually maps to your business use cases so that you're not implementing it each time separately when you are creating these different cloud instances.
It's like everything old is new again.
That's
Remember when
right.
you had to bet on the Oracle stack or the IBM stack or the SAP stack? Now you look at AWS and they've got all of their tools for data governance, but Azure has its tools for data
That's right.
governance. So balancing that and being heterogeneous across multiple environments is key.
Yeah. So abstraction being creating these application architectures so that they are portable. That's why there's a lot of interest in Kubernetes and Kubernetes
Mhm.
based architectures. So those are some of the key requirements that we see.
Yeah. So over the years, Ben, you have been helping some of the largest organizations on earth with their data needs. So, what do you think large enterprise IT organizations should be focused on right now?
Yeah, so that's an that's a question that I get all the time. So one of the key patterns we see is that every business is trying to become a data-driven business.
Yes.
So whether you're a financial services organization or a healthcare or an insurance company or in hospitality, I mean, you there are massive changes going through all these ecosystems.
Mhm.
One is because there are new players that are emerging, so these large organizations have to compete effectively with them. But then there are also new regulatory requirements that you have to comply to so that you're making sure that the things that you're doing are in compliance with regulations like GDPR or
Mhm. Mhm.
CCPA and other things. So what we are seeing is that first of all, enterprise IT departments they have to change their DNA so
Absolutely.
that they're aligned with lines of businesses and
Mhm.
facilitating innovation or rapid deployment of business use cases for those lines of businesses. So agility is one of the key things.
Mhm.
And in doing so, we see emergence of new structures, organizational structures like having data operations teams, so
Yeah.
that you're now focused on how do you take some of the DevOps type of mindset and apply it to data so that you can rapidly ingest data, make the data available quickly
Mhm.
to your downstream stakeholders. And in doing so, you need to have the right platforms and tooling in place so that you're not doing this in an ad hoc way every single time. So you're doing it in a repeatable, automated way so that you are able to keep up with the business demand of the use cases that you need to
So,
support.
these new organizations around data ops and certainly the chief data officer are emerging. And in fact, if you look at any company's annual report right now, data is the new currency.
Hmm.
Data is driving our digital transformation. Data, data, data. Well, here is the tough balance that I think most organizations have to fight with, which is how do we govern, secure, control, manage that greatest asset that we have called data without sacrificing, clamping down, handcuffing those end users who are trying to do that digital transformation or trying to do that big business new initiative. How do you balance those two things?
Sure. And I mean, as you said, right? I mean, if you think data is your most valuable asset, you have to deal with the entire supply chain of data, all the way
Exactly.
from ingestion of data to consumption of data. And what we feel very strongly is that it is having the right sized governance. It's not the traditional top down
Mhm.
governance It's a combination of that top-down governance with a bottom-up governance approach, right? So what do I mean by that? Of course, the crown jewels of a company have to be protected very tightly.
Mhm.
So the data stewards have to be able to govern those data assets and manage it in a very secure way. But at the same time, you need to be able to enable your lines of businesses to also crowdsource governance in a way, right? So because they have the tribal
Absolutely.
knowledge, they know about these data sets. So you need to enable them in a collaborative way so that they are participating in the governance process. So that
Right.
is a key requirement for success in these modern data architectures that we see.
I mean, think about most marketing organizations
Yeah.
now. I mean, they're world-class data ops people in marketing
Yeah,
now.
and they are sourcing data that is very relevant to them that the enterprise IT organization may not be aware of. So the knowledge that they have for the data sources that they're bringing in,
Mhm.
they should be participating in the governance process of those data sets as opposed to trying to do it from a centralized resource.
Yep, agreed. So I don't, as I talk to customers and executives all of the time, I think it's very easy for them to get daunted by this journey, this data governance journey. They think, wow, that's kind of a boil the ocean strategy when they think about every asset in their enterprise as it relates to data.
Yeah.
So I think they're almost shell shocked on where do I start? It seems huge, it seems expensive, it seems daunting. So, how do you advise people on just getting started on this
Yeah.
journey?
I think focusing on a use case is the key, right? I mean, the days of let's build it and they'll come, the field of dreams approach is gone,
It's
right?
gone.
So
It failed.
data used to be the shiny new object. Everyone liked to kind of build things
Yeah.
themselves. So that those days are gone. So right now, what we see is that organizations that are very focused, that have a use case, that's driving business outcomes for them, using such a use case to get started with the right architecture, with the right platform, with the right um, skills and resources is the key for success.
Mhm.
So you need to think about use cases like we see customer 360 being one of a common use case that a lot of these
Mhm.
organizations are trying to build towards. In asset management and others, we see emergence of new data sets like ESG,
Mhm.
environmental, social, and governance related data. So one of our customers, TIA Nuveen, recently won the CIO 100 Innovation Award because they were able to onboard ESG data sets and quickly build new products and services based on kind of their use case driven approach of building this modern data
And just
architecture.
to be clear, it's not like there's already a scoring algorithm for environmental, social, governance type data. It could
Right.
be a magazine article, it could be a report, it could
Yeah.
be anything.
And that's so critical. And that goes back to my earlier point about experimentation. So
Mhm.
being able to quickly onboard these
Exactly.
data sources so that you can give it to the right stakeholders, in this case, the risk analyst or the portfolio managers who are looking at this data and saying that this is how I need to think about violations of environmental regulations in their manufacturing countries, for
Mhm.
example, right? So being able to now come up with different types of scoring models and things like that that didn't exist before,
Exactly.
because these are not your traditional Thomson Reuters or
Mhm.
Bloomberg data sets. These are new data sets that are emerging, and being able to quickly onboard them and drive it from a use case perspective is the key.
Most of our use cases where it deals with new revenue opportunities, this opportunity to monetize your data,
Yeah,
it's not necessarily just your data,
right.
it's other stuff that hasn't been contemplated before.
That's right.
I want to go back to that customer 360 example that you had. This notion of a golden record.
Hmm.
If you're a bank, you grew
Hmm.
by acquisition and you have umpteen different data sources. I think one of our large global bank customers has 5,000 different data sources. So,
Hmm.
this notion of getting to a golden record, talk about that a little bit, and because it's hugely valuable.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more complex. And the reason is that because these banks are trying to move fast,
Mhm.
they are trying to leverage third party outsourced services to do various things. Like,
Mhm.
for example, several of our banking customers, they don't even have their own core banking system. they would use a third-party
Mhm.
system for doing core banking. Similarly, they have a different system for mortgages, a different system for insurance, a different system for investments. So now all their customer data is disaggregated and kind of
Mhm.
distributed in all these
Mhm.
third-party systems. So they don't have a true view of who their customers are or what they're looking for. So being able to bring in the data from all these third-party vendors into their own environment and being able to create this golden record of
Mhm.
their own customer is so critical, because all the new products and services that they come up with needs to be based on who these customers are, what products and services they're interested in. So that's a very repeatable use case that we see across the financial services industry.
And then let's pick it up out of banking and take it to healthcare. So
Right?
population health,
Yeah.
just trying to get to one patient record where you can actually start to do the analysis on.
Yeah, so population health is a very good use case, and then we see real world evidence. So
Mhm.
in pharma, because they're trying to bring in a lot of new data that
Mhm.
they were not used to before, like observational data from claims and other companies like LabCorp and IQVIA and others, so
Mhm.
that they can actually ingest that data along with other data sources to create RWE models that they can drive for downstream use cases.
So the takeaway here is start small, start with something tangible that
Yeah.
can actually provide some sort of, well, not real world evidence, but real world evidence
Yeah.
that this can actually work. And I think where we are advising our clients and customers is take a slice. You don't have to boil the ocean, take a slice. Take two or three data sources and take it all the way, soup to nuts,
Mhm.
beginning to end, because I think the learnings in doing something for the entirety of that life cycle is huge, and then you can extrapolate that to your entire enterprise. So I'm going to give me a little bit of latitude here. I'm going to cut to the punchline of what we want to offer our listeners today. We see this difficulty that our customers have, and how do you even get started? I don't want to boil the ocean. So we've actually created a fast start offering, which is a little bit of software platform and a little bit of services, in the order of like $150,000, just to help you identify and isolate a use case, two or three data sources, start by collecting it, ingest it, do data quality on it, gather the lineage on it, do role-based access controls, and even set up almost like an Amazon shopping experience for your end user constituents, so they can go in and look through the catalog of all the inventory of data that is available to them. Let them see all the characteristics of it, all of that enriched catalog data that we provide, and then let them select it, putting it in their shopping cart, provision a sandbox so they can play around with it and get some value. So we're trying to help our customers really accelerate getting that first use case done, done and dusted, so that people actually see value. So any additional commentary on that?
No, I think that's key. I mean, being able to have self-service access to the data as part of the use case, so that you're not always going to an IT team to provision and
Exactly.
have access to that data is important.
We see so much value
Yeah,
and just get started.
yeah.
Don't get paralyzed by how daunting the task might be. Okay, just a quick reminder, if you have a question for us, we're ready to take them. So feel free to click on that question box. But I think we had already had some teed up. So our friend Amy King is going to feed us some questions.
Thanks, Susan and Ben. First question is about getting started and resources. So if I have a use case and an example within my company, why not just do it ourselves? Why can't we use our own resources? Why do we need to go outside of our own teams to get it done?
Great question. And we get this question a lot, as you can imagine. And then a lot of companies have gone down this path. I mean, if you think about big data was the shiny new object, and they all wanted to build their own data ingestion, data management frameworks. But what we have seen consistently is that after a couple of years, they realize that they cannot keep up with the changes because a lot of these stacks are changing, deployment models are changing, and then there is a whole pent up demand for use cases. So they cannot keep up with the business demand for ingesting new data sources and taking it through the pipeline and making it available. So the time to insight is critical. And I was just talking to a customer where it takes them weeks, if not months, to onboard new data sources and make them available for downstream use cases. So what we're seeing is that CDOs or line of business owner users are getting frustrated because they cannot get data quickly to their downstream users for their analytical use cases. And companies like Zaloni, we specialize on this. That is what we do day in and day out. So we can provide an off-the-shelf platform so that you can quickly get your data from ingestion to consumption with the right governance, with self-service access, without having to build your own. So that's, I think, one of the key outcomes that we drive towards, so that you can go from like weeks or months to days or hours to get new data sources into the platform.
Next question.
Great. Next question is on projects. Our company has so many in the pipe right now, and the list keeps growing. Improving this data pipeline is consistently there, but it's often sort of put on the nice to have list. How can I help get that pushed up in my company's priority list?
I get asked this all the time by people in data ops positions, analysts, etc. And I will tell you what, when I am talking to a chief data officer or chief financial officer, chief compliance officer, I ask them, how can you afford not to make this a must-have? If you think about all of the compliance and regulatory legislation and issue around data, you can't afford not to protect and govern your data. And then rather than focusing on the stick, I'll focus on the carrot. How can you afford not to provide rich, safe data to those business constituents who are trying to drive these transformation initiatives? They're trying to find new sources of revenue. They're trying to optimize costs out of the organization. So I think it's not a nice to have, it's an absolute must have. Next question.
Next question, and Ben, you talked to this a little bit already, but it's really about regulation and the increasing attention paid to customer data sensitivity. So whether it is CCPA or there's been a lot of talk about the death of the cookie, consumer privacy is increasingly in focus. How do you see this affecting the way enterprises are examining, dealing with, and then operating their supply chains?
I think this is a day one requirement for any modern data architecture that you're trying to build. If you do not think about all the security requirements, especially with masking, tokenization, role-based access control, then whatever you're trying to do, those initiatives don't go very far.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to think about it as a foundational requirement for your modern data architecture as you onboard these use cases, so that basically you have a very strong security posture as you build these platforms and drive the use cases.
And you have to automate it. I mean,
Yes.
Talk about one of the initial things I think that you were very prescient when you built this into the platform was just your recommendation engine on what should be tokenized, what should be encrypted. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, data classification is coming up more and more in the discussions that we're having. So our approach is that we're leveraging both deterministic rule-based approach as well as automated machine learning approaches to be able to detect sensitive data, to be able to then classify them as sensitive attributes so that we can automatically apply masking and tokenization functions or rules, so that by the time you make the data available for your broader customer base, they have already gone through that treatment and they have been desensitized and secured from that perspective.
Next question.
Next question is on the data, acceleration of data through the pipeline. We all know, and as you've talked about, there's a lot of value and that can be found as well as cost savings in being able to get data to the analysts faster, especially when it comes to time-sensitive data. So how have you seen, from Zaloni customer perspective, that acceleration mature, that increased time to insight? What are you seeing as an average time savings, and how has that been playing out for your customers?
I'm not sure there's exactly a ratio or average time savings, but what I can say is that our customers are experiencing orders of magnitude of time savings. When you uh, manage the supply chain from the very beginning to the point that an end user can literally put their data in their own shopping cart because they understand how recent is it, who's touched it last, what reports is it used in. Oh, that really credible person that I really respect in marketing operations uses that data. Oh, that probably means that's good data for me too. So when you have that kind of stuff in your catalog, it helps you make really, really informed decisions on what data that you should use. And as soon as you can make a really smart decision when you're shopping for data, it takes the amount of time down from months and weeks because you're not having to call IT to say, can you cobble together all of this stuff for me? You can actually self service a little bit. And so all of a sudden, your time to getting insight on your data goes from months and weeks, like I said, to days and maybe even hours. That's what our customers are experiencing.
That's great. We have another question that's just come in too about multi-cloud. Great question. So are organizations using a multi-cloud strategy in production? And if so, how are they splitting the data? Are they creating silos or creating alternatives?
I can take a stab at that. So what we're seeing is that a lot of these use cases, especially when they involve multi-cloud, is fit for purpose, right? So if you have certain data sets that are being generated in AWS,
Mhm.
they remain in AWS, and then you're bringing in other necessary data for that specific use case. So what we're seeing is that there is quite a bit of data sprawl going on, right? Because of that, there is a very decentralized approach so that you now have data stores in different cloud service providers, whether it's AWS, Azure, or Google. So you need to have that centralized view of governance and control to be able to enable various business use cases on top of it. So
And that's where extensibility becomes really important.
That's critical for these architectures.
Great. One more question. In terms of trends that you're seeing, it's 2020. So what are we seeing in terms of, for analysts, allowing them to make better use of the data catalog? The data catalog's been around for a little while. What are the trends we're seeing in really bringing it forward and making it of even greater use within the enterprise?
So for data analysts and for broader data consumers, if you will, I think catalog is a must-have, right? And then there's a lot of noise in this space because everyone wants to talk about catalogs. But from our perspective, there are a few key requirements that you need to have for a catalog. So first of all, we talked about collaboration between line of business users and data stewards and others. So your catalog needs to facilitate that so that you're able to capture the tribal knowledge and bring like that bottom-up governance model into the catalog. The other key thing, which is frequently missed by a lot of the vendors, is that it needs to provide a holistic view. So, catalog is not just a listing of data sets or the schema of those data sets. You need to be able to combine your business metadata with the technical metadata, and
With
more
the
importantly,
operational
with the
metadata.
operational metadata. You need to have a view of what's the lineage of this data set. What is the data quality of it? Can I trust this data set? Who else has looked at it, and
How many times?
exactly. So that holistic view is quite important. What we're seeing more and more is that intelligence being a key part of catalog requirements. So Gartner calls it the augmented data catalog. What we are facilitating with data classification and some of these features is to make sure that the system can make recommendations about these entities in the catalog, whether it's a sensitive attribute, whether it is related, one entity is related to another entity, and things like that, so that human users have to do less and less, and the system can do more and more. And then the last but not least is that it needs to be actionable, and you need to have this concept of self-service. So what we have done with our approach with catalog is to enable this whole shopping cart experience, so that you can come, find, search data. You can then introspect these data sets, and if you like them because you want to do the experimentation, you can add them to your shopping cart, and then you can provision a sandbox, all in like a consistent user interface experience, in the same user interface, in the same platform. So that's critical for success of the catalogs.
But not just action it from an end consumer of data, but you could action it from a data ops
Sure.
standpoint.
Yeah,
I mean, we did all of this recently. We've just done all of this integration and automation with ServiceNow. So let's say as you're going through this life cycle of data, you spot a new data quality issue.
right.
Well, you should be able to just click and kick off some sort of a workflow or a job or a ServiceNow request to actually action your data
That's right.
itself.
Yep.
Not just action an analytic workload, but take an action on the data
Yeah,
itself.
no, that's a very valid point. And that kind of integration with things like ServiceNow
Exactly.
to kick off other workflows in an enterprise is critically important.
So I think trying to be a catalog as your end goal, just if that's the end all be all, then you haven't done the rest of the work.
I'd say the days of a dumb catalog are over.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be able to do something on the data with the data to be able to get value out of the data.
That's right.
Exactly. All right, Amy, any other questions?
No, and I think that was a great place to end. So thank you both very much. We're going to be reaching out to everybody on the webinar with a follow-up. So thank you all for joining today, our first live talk.
And don't forget as well, we are going to be at Gartner's Data and Analytics Conference in March in Texas. So if you're at the Gartner DNA conference, please come say hi. I'm so excited to be at Zaloni. So thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And if you like this, Ben and I will do more of these.
Thank you.
Thanks.